Today, I am Dominique Daniels Clark, and today I am here to present the defense to my research. So the research question that I opted to answer is going to be, what role has the Black church played in contemporary education, and how can the efforts of the early church promote the overall advancement of African Americans today? As some of you may know and others may not know, Christianity has always played the preceding role in the permittance of African American literacy in the United States. And since then, it has been the institution of the Black church that has been instrumental in advancing educational outcomes as well as fostering African American progress. Unfortunately, since the 1960s, America has experienced a consistent decline in religious conviction, as well as a decline in overall value of education. Unfortunately, for the African American community, those cases in the 1960s that officially started the plight to the separation of church and state are going to be even more detrimental to the African American communities. Why? Because of the historical entanglement of education and religion. For so long, education correlated with religion. We can go back to the slaves. For slaves, it is going to be Christianity was their way to education in terms of Bible literacy. Our contemporary educational statistics as well as reports are going to reflect that there are major disparities in the academic performance of African American scholars compared to other demographic groups. But nevertheless, the contemporary church still has the ability to indirectly influence America's school system. I want you guys to think of it like this. If the church is unable to directly influence the schools, then it's their responsibility to directly influence the individual in which is sitting in that school. And how can we do that? Sometimes the answers to our questions or the solution to our problems have already been presented. This can be done by recognizing early institutional or individual theologies, philosophies, or practices of self-determination and academic success, readopting those practices, and then readapting them to approach contemporary societal issues that in the end influence contemporary educational outcomes. It is the commitment of self-determination of the early church. It is the theology of the Christian education of the whole person presented by Mary McLeod Bethune, as she also made sure that she had a cultural-based training that catered to the head, the hand, as well as the heart. It's ideologies of John Dewey. It is the Black liberation theology that became prominent in the 1960s, 1950s and the 60s with the civil rights movement. These are the initiatives and the ideas that the contemporary church needs to revisit. Even though societal circumstances are different, these theologies are timeless, and they have been able to transcend throughout generations and still prove themselves to be just as effective today as they were back then. Why is this research significant? It is significant because it first acknowledges the church's ability to have long-standing positive impressions on access to schooling as well as educational outcome. And it reveals early institutional and individual theologies, philosophies, or practices that can be successfully readopted and readapted to approach contemporary societal issues, which in turn influence contemporary educational outcomes. And as one can imagine, this can have profound effects on America's education system as well as America's economy. This is a contemporary study, and its purpose is to understand the current needs, the contemporary needs and desires of the African American community, and provide mechanisms in which the current Black church or the contemporary Black church can actually meet those needs. Different time periods require different efforts. Hopefully, this research can facilitate the unlocking of the sealed relationship between pastors, parents, and youth, while initiating a national conversation of the benefits of scholars, both young and old, having active spiritual lives. This work aims to contribute to rebuilding the home, school, and church relationship in order to maximize the educational outcome for African American students. Now let's talk about methodology and some of my primary sources that I utilize. This is a historical analysis of the role of Christianity in the Black church in the attainment and the progression of African American education. It's a chronological account of the progressive educational efforts of early Christianity and the Black church. It also provides readers with a narrative of the evolving role of the Black church during contemporary education. It is a comprehensive study of the changing attitudes regarding Christianity's role in education in both the African American communities as well as American society in general. I use a plethora of resources. To start off, I wanted to create a narrative of what exactly is the Black church and what was this purpose initially as the silent institution. It was considered to be a silent institution really into the emancipation of the slaves or Reconstruction. One of the first things that slaves did or newly freed men did once they were freed is two things. They built churches and looked for education. And this is not something that should be taken lightly. I will use slave narratives, recollections of the Great Awakening, minutes of the early Methodist Church, Richard Allen's papers. All of these sources are able to contribute to providing readers with a great synopsis of the evolution of the institution of the Black church, as well as their earlier theologies in terms of education. As stated before, the separation between church and state has had even more detrimental consequences on the African American community. And this is reflected in contemporary educational research and studies and data. During the 1960s, the Black church is going to find itself at the center of the facilitation of a movement that advocated for the improvement in African Americans' quality of life. And ironically, the same decade that's known for the church's involvement in the political, the social, as well as the educational outcomes through legislature is also simultaneously going to be known as a decade where the relationship between church and state is going to officially come to an end. This is a decade where the school or the education system is going to be officially dumped by the state in terms of education. So I wanted to be able to present a thorough account of all of these laws and court cases and legislature that is going to allow readers to adequately trace the decline and the change in attitudes regarding Christianity's role in American education. Thankfully, in my research, I was able to utilize some great sources. I came across some great scholarly articles that were located in the Journal of Negro Education as well as the Journal of African American Studies. I studied individuals and theologies of individuals like Thomas Sowell. When it comes to the inequalities and disparities of African American communities, he is the go-to person in terms of how to deal with the disparities. A lot of the times, individuals focus on the things around them, but don't focus on the things that they can do to actually help them survive the things around them until it doesn't affect them anymore. So the individual emphasis that Thomas Sowell is going to have is going to be next to none when it comes to the disparities and inequalities that's experienced by African American, not only students, but their community as a whole. I cannot finish this out without bringing up Breonna K. Parker's I Still Believe in the Black Church. It is the first of its kind in 21 years. And as a millennial and a preacher's, a granddaughter to two Pentecostal preachers, I also believe in the Black church. I Still Believe in the Black Church was inspiration for me. And I wanted to conduct personal research that also provided African Americans with contemporary information, data, practices, policies that could eventually contribute to the revitalization of the home church network, which eventually is going to influence academic performance as a whole. Despite the temporary church's restrictions, and due to the fact that they're unable to directly influence or play a role in America's education system, it still doesn't negate the findings that there is a positive correlation between religion and education. For instance, studies show that students who attend religious services regularly, they tend to perform better academically. This could be due to social support or moral guidance. Findings also suggest that scholars with a religious foundation, they have better coping skills. They're able to curb their behavior. They're able to buffer against negative effects of stress that academics may bring. Religious identity can shape a person's aspiration. What does this mean? A person's religion could eventually affect what profession they choose to go into. And a study presented by the Journal for Scientific Study, it finds that high school students who participate in church activities, they actually score higher on standardized math and reading tests. The Black liberation theology, the Christian education of a whole person, theologies like that of Mary McLeod Bethune, John Dewey. Christianity is the foundational religion of America. And in 1962, these court cases are going to be initiated by individuals of Jewish descent. In a true American fashion, in their attempts to accommodate other individuals, the United States failed to consider the ramifications on American Christians. As an educator, for 10 years, I have witnessed standardized testing. The whole schedule will be changed to accommodate Jewish holidays. I have to make special accommodations during Eid as well as Ramadan. I have to let my kids leave my classroom in order to conduct group afternoon prayer. And all of this religious activity is evident in their academic performance. So this study is just to help all education stakeholders know, whether you are a student, a parent, official, a principal, a teachers, for Black students, religion matters. And sometimes the answers to our questions, the solutions to our problems have already been presented to us. And sometimes we just need to, as I stated, readopt as well as readapt some of these early theologies. Historically, African Americans depended on the Black church. And unfortunately, for decades, maybe even centuries. A lot of African Americans have not been privy to the information that is able to portray to them just how important the Black church is when it comes to the overall outcomes, whether it is social outcomes, economic outcomes, political outcomes, educational outcomes. It has always been, historically, the Black church has always been the cornerstone of the Black experience. Study is just to help all education stakeholders know, whether you are a student, a parent, official, a principal, a teachers. For Black students, religion matters.